Hi, you're listening to the Rav Dessler Giving Podcast with me, Avram Ziedman. Join us as we weave together philosophy, psychology, and Kabbalah to uncover a new depth to what it means to being a giver. Hi everyone, so in today's podcast I want to look at practical tips. How can I really become a giver? Okie dokie. Up until now we said there's two parts to a person, a body and a soul. As far as the body is concerned, the only language the body understands is gimme, 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 taking. It is the soul that sees beyond the superficial and desires to be able to give. So here we have a battle of body and souls. I think the way we need to look at it is really, how do you train a dog? I don't know if you've got a pet dog. But when you have a pet, imagine the scene. You have one owner who is screaming and shouting and abusing this dog. Is that going to turn the dog into man's best friend? It's not going to work. You have to work with the animal, not against the animal. If you're continuously putting down and bashing up this animal, it's going to rebel and it ain't going to be pleasant. So too when it comes to our body. A person can push down and quash the body for a certain amount of time. You can force it to do what the soul ultimately wants to do. But after a while, it just springs up. And the thing is the more you push it down, then the harder it bounces back afterwards. Unfortunately, I've seen this many times where a person believes for religious reasons that it's important for them to be able to quash their body. That is not healthy. And for several years, they've managed to be able to ignore the body needs, ignore their personality, and just, flip out. And several years later, there's a knock on the door, and the body says, "Hi, remember me?" And all of a sudden, they start falling. And what happened? I tell you what happened. You never took the body for the ride. So the soul cannot force itself upon the body and say, shut up, be quiet, just listen to me. We're going to become givers whether you like it or not. It may work in the short term, and sometimes, carefully, it may be needed in the short term, but in the long term, it does not work. And on the other side, so if I was to say, fine, okay, body, whatever you want, you got it. Okay, just do whatever, I'm here for you. Pamper the body. I'm going to pamper the dog, look after the dog, give the dog everything it wants. The dog will just get fat. The dog will not listen to any commands. That too is also not going to work. So clearly we need balance. We need to be working with the body, speaking kindly to the body to encourage it to become a giver. So how do we get the balance? How am I going to work with my pet dog? How am I going to work with my body, ultimately, to convince the body to become a giver? So the answer is that there's two parts to growth. Stage 1 is breaking the comfort zone, and stage 2 is the reconciliation. This, in Kabbalistic terms, is referred to as yira and then ahava. Stage 1, we have to break out of our comfort zone, do something a little bit uncomfortable, but not go too far as to cause a rebellion from the body, and at the same time not to be content where we are. So I break slightly out. And you know what? At that stage, breaking out of the comfort zone, it is painful, it is hard, it's not nice. That's what we refer to again as yira. If you do that enough times, then God created in this physical world that there is a power called habit. And you do it enough times, it becomes one with you. That is the second stage, the reconciliation, known also as ahava, love. For those who want to hear it in a bit more depth, the rabbis tell us, Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz miyira shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heavens apart from the fear of God. So the question Rav Dessler asks is, what do you mean? Everything's in the hands of God apart from the fear of God? What about love? No, that too is in the hands of God. And vis-a-vis what we're discussing, this is what it means. The only thing that I can do is break my comfort zone, break out of my boundaries. I can do that. But just because I break out of it, why is it that if I do it several times, I become one with it? That's God who created it. God was the one who created habit. You can't create this feeling of one with something. If you do it enough time, if you battle enough time, God does the rest. He creates the habit known as love. But it's really important to note, you can't take on the next battle until the first battle you are won with. You can't spend your whole life battling. It works in the short term, but in the long term, the body is going to rebel. Yes, we want to change ourselves instantly. Yes, we want to become givers. But it's not going to work unless we do small increments. Fight out of comfort zone. Do it 30 times. Okay, I'm one with this now. Now take on the next, slightly out your comfort zone. Okay, good. You come one with it. It's a habit. Now keep on moving. Don't take on the next thing until the first thing becomes a habit. And this power of habit we see in the Torah, and we also see it in science. The Rambam brings the following scenario. Imagine you have £100 and you have in front of you 10 charities, each requiring £1,000. Is it better to give £100 in one go to one charity? Or is it better to give a tenner to each of the charities? Either way, you're not going to fulfill their needs. Which is better? Says the Rambam, it is better to give £10 to each charity rather than giving it all to one. Why? Now you may say, surely it's better to give £100 to one, because that mitzvah in itself is that much greater. It's harder to give £100 in one go than to give a small amount often. And the Rambam says, yes, the mitzvah of the £100 in one go may be a better quality mitzvah. But let's look at the broader picture here. What is going to affect your personality the most is not according to the quality of the mitzvah, but rather the quantity of the mitzvah. And therefore, when you give more often, true, the mitzvah itself may be less significant, but the habit is going to be created. And we also see this with science as well. There's something called neural pathways. When you send a message in your brain, you have electrons which go from one end to the other to give the message. But if you were to send the same message again and again and again, then in your mind you create new neural pathways. New pathways in your head which gets the message quicker from one end to the other. If you take a car analogy and you have to pick someone up on the other side of town, you have to take a left and a right, then forward, straight, left, left, right, forward. But if you do it enough time, then a new highway is being created. And the more times you do this journey, so to speak, then the stronger the pathway comes, the bigger and wider it comes, and the faster the message gets across. This is not just mere theory or psychological. There is a physical change in the brain in creating a habit. And that explains why when you do a habit originally, it is hard. But you do it enough time, God created in the world that habits change physically your psyche and it becomes easier. Which means I have an opportunity to be able to buy something or to give something. I've got an opportunity to either get on with my work or get up and make a coffee for someone. When I decide to be able to make that coffee, I'm going to give the coffee. To begin with, it is an external action. It is not truly coming from my soul. I want to be a giver. I'm training the body. And the body will have a little bit of rebellion there. A tiny amount is fine. But when you do it again and again and again, then ultimately you become one with it. It becomes part of your nature and it becomes easier. It says in the Gemara Sanhedrin about the body, Masbiehu ro'ev maraviu savea. That very curious thing takes place with the body. And this hunger for taking. He says that with this hunger of wanting to take, if you satisfy it, you become more hungry. But if you starve it, then you'll satisfy it. And like all good analogies, we can look at dieting as an example. Originally, when I start dieting, I'm very, very hungry. But when I build a habit, then the body starts quieting down. If I was to fight the body continuously and totally starve myself, then that's called yo-yo dieting. I'm gonna get it afterwards again. I can force the body, be quiet, I'm not going to eat, and push down the body. Okay, that'll work for a short while. But if I start creating habits of when I'm going to eat, how much I'm going to eat, and start pushing a little bit, then by starving this desire, then slowly it goes away. If, on the other hand, I continuously try to satisfy the body's never going to be satiated, as we've explained in other previous podcasts. If I give in to my desire to take, I'm never going to be happy because it's not the thing itself I want, it's just a desire to expand. I have to be able to break that. Dessler points out that this process of creating the habit is hard and a little bit, painful, going outside of our comfort zone. But he points out that anyone who wants to look at the broader picture realizes it's worth going through this small amount of pain of creating a habit than ultimately living a life where I am always filled with this hunger of wanting to expand. If we just visualize and imagine a world where I don't feel like I have to have the next thing. I have to always need to be able to take in more. Imagine a world where I'm free from the desires and the impulses of the body always saying me, 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 where I can give freely without feeling any pain at all. It's worth going through the creation of habits for that. Even if it's hard to begin with, it's worth it. Please God, in other podcasts, we'll look at this power of habits and we'll look at other methods also of becoming a giver. But until now, be great, be a giver, build giving habits. All the best. This podcast was proudly brought to you by Gift, where we're on a mission to inspire and enable lifelong giving. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to continue exploring the art of giving with us, please subscribe.